everyone, and welcome to MyGuru GRE GMAT Logical Reasoning Information Session. My name is Stefan, and I'm Director for Online Tutoring, and one of our primary GMAT GRE instructors as well. So, as folks join in here today from wherever you are, I will have the chat box open. So, if anybody has any questions, as you come in, you can use the chat box to ask any questions. I may wait to respond to questions until after certain points in the demonstration here. So you should everybody have the chat box open, hopefully, and go ahead and communicate that way. So I will go ahead and share my screen. Online whiteboard classroom here, and we've got a sample logical reasoning question from the ETS official verbal workbook. And this is basically the format that you'll have for both GRE and GMAT logical reasoning style questions. Now, both the GMAT and the GRE obviously have verbal sections, and within each of their verbal sections, you may encounter critical reasoning on the GMAT is what it's called, or logical reasoning, or just single question argumentation based problems in the GRE. So both of these questions are, so this question is viable for both of the exams. And you can see that generally what you'll encounter is something wherein you have a little paragraph of a scenario, and then you've got a question asking you, in most cases, to do something to an argument. So frequently you'll see questions that ask you to strengthen, to weaken, to find an assumption, to find a flaw. And so we'll get to this example here in a moment, but the first thing that we want to consider as we think about logical reasoning style questions for both of these exams is just something called the argumentation equation. So this is going to be an equation. So whenever you engage with an argument, you basically are dealing with some level of reasoning. And so the argumentation equation will always involve some sort of premise, underline there. So some sort of premise plus what is known as an assumption. And your equation will always end in some sort of conclusion or claim. And when you're considering these pieces for argumentation, what you're looking at is a situation where you're so what you have is a conclusion that is ultimately going to end up being at some level subjective, and your premise or grounds, which is going to be always objective. So the premise are your objective facts. And when you consider your premise, you shouldn't be able to really quibble with said objective facts. They are just assumed to be accurate. Now, your conclusion or claim is going to be the subjective opinion. And so it's the thing that requires additional support. So the premise provides support, and your conclusion or claim is what requires support. And the assumption is an interesting piece in that both the objective facts and the subjective opinion for logical reasoning, whether it's the GRE or GMAT style, you're going to have a situation wherein the facts are basically going to be explicit. So you're not going to have to wonder what the conclusion is. You're not going to have to wonder what the premise is. They're both explicitly included in the little prompt, the paragraph, as you see here on the whiteboard. whereas the assumption is implied and unstated. So this part is the thing that must be true in order to link your two pieces from the premise to the conclusion or claim. So this is your basic argumentation equation. And again, we can set up with the chat box if anybody has any specific questions before we apply this kind of concept to the example here above. There are a bunch of different synonyms as well that apply to your argumentation equation. Your premise is sometimes also going to be known as grounds, could be known as support, it could be known as your evidence, it could be known as your reasoning. So there are a bunch of different synonym terms that can indicate your premise. And similarly for your conclusion, obviously we've got conclusion or claim up there. Opinion is also going to be one that you'll frequently see. So recommendation is another type of term. You might also see, obviously, opinion. Your position is another term that you'll frequently encounter when you're talking about the conclusion. And obviously, really, it's those ones: recommendation, position, opinion, claim, conclusion, indicators of your conclusion. So, our argumentation equation. We need to then evaluate this problem here. And anytime you encounter a problem, step one for any logical reasoning style question. So let's call this our logical reasoning process. Step one is you have to identify what the question task is, because that's going to tell you what you have to do to your argument. So in this case, we have a situation asking for which of the following, if true, most strengthens the argument. If we were actually writing down notes for the GRE, you'd probably just write out the word strengthens. But here, I could just highlight what the task is as most strengthens. So then we'll identify the question task. Step two is going to be to read and determine the as presented. So I will allow everyone to take a moment and just read the prompt on the page so that hopefully we can identify what that conclusion would be. So everyone take a moment, read the prompt, and then we might go back to the chat box and have someone just tell me what is the sentence that is presented as our conclusion. So hopefully that gave everyone enough time, but can anyone in the chat box identify the conclusion of this prompt? If anybody's on their computer and wants to type in, you can just tell me what is the position, the thing that requires more support from this little scenario. And that is correct, Michaela. So what we're looking at is this first sentence up here. So just underline this thing ultimately. Conclusion. And so ultimately requiring more support, that the sales can be increased by the presence of a sunlight within a store has been shown by the experience of the only Save Fast department store with a large skylight. Now, when you're considering your conclusion here, and we can kind of here, another text box down here. So your conclusion identification test is first going to be to avoid considering any pure statements of fact, because we know that the conclusion is the opinion. We can still see that, with our little bit of the equation that's still visible here. So the next sentence after the one we identified as the conclusion, the skylight allows sunlight into half of the store, reducing the need for artificial light. That's a fact. That is just what a skylight does, so it can't be the conclusion. The rest of the store uses only artificial light. Again, just a straight statement of fact. There's no opinion involved here, so we don't have to consider that. And then since the store opened 2 years ago, the departments on the sunlit side have had substantially higher sales than the other departments. Again, that's just a statement of fact. So you don't have to think of those as possible conclusions. Now, this one's relatively straightforward, but if you have two statements remaining, you want to take any possible subjective claims, and what you're going to do, consider which supports the other, because whichever statement requires support is the conclusion. So when you're thinking about what would be the conclusion, that's how you're going to want to do it. So this setup here to our process problem. And so once we've read the prompt and determined the conclusion as presented, we want to predict what the answer should do to address the question task. Excuse me. So in this case, we're looking at a situation wherein we want to strengthen the argument. So we want to come up with some sort of, basic idea of how we would support the idea that it's only the sales or only the sunlight that has increased the sales. So my prediction here, we want to just have it kind of written out to strengthen, is just going to be something to the effect of show that the sunlight and only the sunlight led to an increase in sales. Because that's the key, is making sure that the only thing that's possible for the increase in sales is the sunlight. And you don't want to say exactly what's going to show up as your proper answer. That's going to be the basics. Now, step 4 is then going to be to process of eliminate your prediction against the choices. So let's go ahead and bring So we'll move our process down just over. Set up here with these choices. So let's make it a bit bigger and we will work through the options. So now we just need to show that it had to be the sunlight. And when we're considering our answer choices here. Still on the screen that we can see, we've got some common logical reasoning wrong answers. So common argument wrong answer reasons. Just a hair back in here. So we start with this first question, choice A. So on particularly cloudy days, more artificial light is used to illuminate the part of the store under the skylight. So do we think that this strengthens? And you could just, in the chat box, answer, does it strengthen yes or no? Strengthen, choice A, strengthen yes or no. So what does the group think about choice A? Does it strengthen the idea that the sunlight and only the sunlight has increased the sales? So we got a yes. So anyone else? Another question mark yes. So let's hold on to this one, and we can use a little squiggle to indicate a possible hold on. Now, let's take a look at choice B. So when the store is open at night, the departments in the part of the store under the skylight that have sales, or sorry, under the skylight have sales that are no higher than those of other departments. So how about this choice? Does this strengthen? So does B potentially strengthen, yes or no? So here's where we've got to make sure that we read carefully. And you have to apply the information from these choices as opposed to just reading them and thinking about it. You have to make sure that you interrogate all of the pieces. So let's go back to A first. Do we know how many particularly cloudy days there are at this store? Do we know how many particularly cloudy days? And we don't know. We have no idea, as Corey said, about how many cloudy days there are here. So if I don't know that, do we even know that this has any impact? If I don't even know, could there be 0 cloudy days, theoretically, right? So particularly cloudy is equal to basically particularly vague, because the number of cloudy days could equal 0, and it could equal all. So this is one of our common wrong answer reasons when we look at choice A, which is that it has a vague impact. Because you basically have a situation where you don't know whether this has an impact at all, because we can't tell how many cloudy days there are. So any questions about why we can eliminate choice A as being vague? Any questions about eliminating choice A first? So then we have to always apply the information to the prompt, not just say, is it true? So always apply the choice info and determine the impact on that claim or conclusion that we already identified. So choice B says when the store is open at night, the departments in the part of the store under the skylight have sales that are no higher than those of other departments. Now, let me just ask an honest question. Does choice B seem strangely phrased and hard to understand? Extremely wordy. And there's like a double negative here too, right? So night and the part under the score have under the skylight have are no higher than those of other departments. So this one is definitely more difficult to apply. So on the first pass, if you're having trouble understanding something, you can't eliminate it. So we could just put a question mark next to this for now, just being like, okay, this is hard to follow, so let's just hold that one. Now, similarly, to the reason we eliminated for choice A, why might we be able to eliminate choice C for being vague? So we've got a scenario in our conclusion that says that sales have been increased by the sunlight, right? And choice C says that many customers purchase items from departments in both parts of the store on a single shopping trip. Does C say which more? No, it doesn't. So it doesn't say whether more is bought in the sun or out of the sun. And so that, if we can't tell, do we know that this strengthens or weakens or does anything to our conclusion about the sunlight and only the sunlight leading to an increase in sales? I'd say no. So this one's out. And again, we could say purchase items. You're like, well, I don't know if that's more with the sunlight or not. So I could call this vague again. So then we've got to consider this choice D. Besides the skylight, there are several significant architectural differences between the two parts of the store. So does this choice say that only the sunlight is the reason for the change in sales? No. So this actually weakens the argument. So this is another common wrong answer reason. It's a reverse impact. Because this is saying there's actually potentially another thing besides the skylight that could be causing the change in sales. So this is a reversal because it weakens the conclusion. So any questions about D there being basically the opposite of what we're seeking? So same general idea about E. Does E supports the idea that only the sunlight is responsible for the change in sales? Because if the departments in the part of the store under the skylight are the departments that generally have the highest sales in other stores in the Save Fast chain. It's neutral. It's saying that, is it the skylight or is it the department that dictates, the increase in sales? So for choice E, is it the skylight department causing the increase in sales? So just to everybody, if we believe if choice E is accepted as correct or as true, which is the cause? Is it the choice of department or is it the sunlight and the skylight that's causing the increase in sales? The choice of departments is Michaela identified there. So this is another reverse this time that are the cause. So we have to go back to B. And honestly, if you're working through the answer choices and can come up with reasons to eliminate everything else, you already know what the answer has to be if you've got anything that isn't an X next to it. But if we apply, and so we end up just kind of voting this question mark up to a check now. When the store is open at night, the department in the part of the store under the skylight, or the departments in the part of the store under the skylight, have sales that are no higher than those of other departments. So when the store is open at night, what isn't there? That's relevant to the argument. The sunlight. So what B is saying tacitly is that if you have no sunlight, you have the same sales. So if without the sunlight, you have the same sales, what's causing the change in sales? So if the sales are the same at night, what must be causing the change during the day? Because you do have to apply some outside knowledge. You can apply outside knowledge that is true worldwide, because what disappears at night that is present during the day? The sun. So this is saying that it's the sun and only the sun that is leading to that increase in sales. So just to kind of put a bow on our common argument wrong answers reasons. So you saw the two big ones, vague impact, reverse impact. You have to make sure that you can identify the definition of any term or quantity within your answer choices. Now you also have something where additional information is needed to determine the impact. And this is basically where they introduce a new variable to the prompt. So you're looking at it and you're like, well, this is some sort of new information that, maybe they talk about another store brand. Like instead of Fast, they start talking about Fast Save. And you're like, okay, I don't know anything about Fast Save, so I can't determine what the impact is. And lastly, and this is the one that you have to be most careful about, is no impact. Because what I think that you may have thought when you saw B is, who cares about at night, right? I'm talking about the sun. Why do I care about at night? But opposite. So if you're going to say something has no impact, that must be whether the information is true or false. Because basically you've got to apply both the statement as it is and as the opposite. Because here in the store is open at night, the departments in the store under the skylight have sales that are no higher than those of the other departments. You're like, well, that's weird to say. But if I get rid of the no higher and I say that when the store is open at night, the departments in the part of the store under the skylight that sales have that have under the skylight have sales that are higher than those of other departments, well, then I go, well, the sun clearly isn't the important thing. So you always have to think, if you're going to say this is completely quote unquote out of scope, which is probably my least favorite reason to eliminate, that you apply the information both as a in the affirmative and the negative to make sure that it truly has no impact. Because you don't want to just pick a choice that vaguely sounds relevant, which is probably why folks picked A to start, because you're like, cloudy, well, that has to do with sun. Got to apply the information in order to be certain of the proper impact on your argument. So that's a good kind of overview on just the basic approach for logical reasoning here. And I can now open up just the chat box for any questions that you might have. So feel free. Any questions in the chat box? Glad you enjoyed it. Anybody have any specific questions? I'll give you. Glad that it was informed. So obviously, if you have any questions, you can contact me directly for any follow-up. You can also contact our info for just general information. And unless anybody has any questions about any of this, the equation, the conclusion identification test, the process, anything, we'll close up for give everybody a moment asking questions. Of course, I understand that it's a work day too, so if folks got to drop off, I understand. We will send an email to everybody with a link. I think we posted to YouTube. I don't remember exactly where it ends up getting posted to, whether it's YouTube or my website directly. But regardless, there will be an email of the recording after today, probably be sent out later this week. So you can watch everything back again. Of course. Any other questions from anybody? All righty then, folks. We will go ahead and finish this up. Have a great rest of your week. And like I said, I'll send this recording out to everyone who registered later this week as well. Take care.